All right, so it is Advaita Thursday, which doesn't work. Well, Advaita Thursday. So we're reading I Am That, and we're on the section called Discrimination Leads to Detachment. So another word for discrimination, discernment, just inner awareness, leads you to detachment, leads you to be able to let go of those extraneous things that are not necessary for you to live this moment in harmony. So, by discernment, by going in and becoming aware of your inner world, this is the beautiful thing. And this is something that we call grace, but it's built into the system that awareness is self-correcting. Why? Because it's an awareness of a being or of an isness that has a nature of pure love, pure wisdom, and pure existence. And so, because those three are its nature, just living in that awareness brings things into alignment with that. So it's not, we don't have to go inside and fix everything. That's the normal way we think about working interiorly. But we really just have to go inside and stop being carried away by our thinking, carried away by ideas and thoughts, sensations, plans, all of those things, not to get carried away and get caught in that net of things, but that we need to stay aware of ourselves as being this divine light or this divine isness, and observing in that fullness all that is, both inside and outside, because actually one of the results of this discernment is coming to the knowledge that there is no outside. That's always the fun part of Vedanta. Anyway, so discrimination leads to detachment. And the questioner's been talking with Nisargadatta Maharaj and asking him about his world. And we've kind of determined that Nisargadatta lives in a very different space than this common man who's asking the questions. And the common man has started to refer to these two universes and starts asking Nisargadatta about his universe. And, Sri Nisargadatta lives in a universe that has no history, lives in a universe that has no bondage, lives in a universe where there is no time, and is fully aware of his non-identity with any story going on in his body-mind at that time. And so today's question, the questioner starts off with, who is the ruler of your world? Who's in charge? Who's making things happen? Maharaj says there are no ruler and ruled here. There is no hierarchy here, right? It's about principle, not about rules. There's a place in the complete works that Vivekananda says God is principle, which I latched onto immediately because I'd never heard God referred to as principle before. But it makes perfect sense that God, the unchanging absolute, right, would be a principle. He couldn't be anything else. It would have to be a principle, an unchanging absolute, a principle of love, a principle of compassion, of grace, of wisdom, of existence. And that when that principle manifests, because it's interesting in John, we talked yesterday in one of the classes about in the book of John in the New Testament. One of the very interesting things that he says in the very first chapter, first verse, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Right? So you've got immediately in Christianity, the very first sentence, the same dichotomy that you find in the Vedanta. You've got God and his power, milk and its whiteness, fire and its power to burn. That these two, that seeming two, are actually a singularity, but you can talk about them as two. And so we've got the absolute, and then we've got the manifest. And so he's talking here, that he observes, as it were, observes from the absolute segment. He's a watcher, aware of his absolute unchanging nature, which means he's aware of that reality and sees that we live in an unreality because we're creating a movie of change based on our wrong establishment of our sense of identity in mind rather than in self, inside. So he says there are no ruler and ruled here. There is no duality whatsoever wherever he is from his experience of being. Well, it's not an experience of being, because he doesn't live in a place where he is experiencing. He is observing the character that most of us are thinking that we are. It is, it's. I have a perfect example for this, but it's not one that I talk about normally. But I'm going to share it with you guys. If you want to hold this against me, it's fine. This happened way back in 1994, where I was pursuing spiritual, not ideals. I wasn't into anything. I was just kind of checking things out, trying to find some meaning for life, trying to find something interesting. And as part of that, I went on a guided trip. All right, here it comes. I don't want to see this on YouTube anywhere, and I don't want to get kicked out of the order because of one of you. But in 1994, I went on a guided LSD experience to explore the inner world. And one of the things that happened in that experience taught me exactly what he's talking about here. And I had a big conversation with Prabhutananda about this later on also, which was very wonderful. But in this experience, I was having a conversation with two other people. So we're the three of us talking. And I became aware of the fact that all three of the voices were in my head. It was a very, very strange experience. I could see that all three voices were in my head. I could blame them on external things, but the experience was, as I saw in that moment, all three voices were in my head. And as I was kind of sort of being reoriented by that thought, I thought, how strange is this? All three of us exist only in my head. And then I thought, as I was wondering about that, I lost track of which voice was mine. I was like, which one is mine? Because I had gotten caught up in the thought about all three voices being in my head that I had actually checked out from the conversation. And when I came back to the conversation, I realized the conversation was still going on. This is the thing. This is so important. It was such a beautiful moment, and why it's important enough for me to tell you about it, quaking that you might misunderstand. But this notion that three voices in the conversation, I realized were all existent in my head. I got detached from the voice that I had identified with as being mine, couldn't remember which one it was. And as I was out thinking about all this, that conversation that those three voices were having still carried on, still happened, even though I couldn't tell which one was mine. Do you get the importance of that? Wow. That we are not the doer, that it is possible for you to completely detach from your voice of the personality that you think you are, and it will carry on because it's a product of karma. It's the product of a mind that's just excreting one thought after another. It's a product of habit, and it carries on. That's this prarabdha karma. That's this whole idea but this body just carries on. Look at Thakur, Sri Ramakrishna. He was completely detached from himself as a body mind, regularly soaring into the heavens. And yet his entire ministry carried on, right? Carried on because he could observe it. He could see it, but he knew that he wasn't doing it. He also could have easily lost, and maybe did, I don't know, awareness of which voice belonged to him as he was just simply watching this play, right? Watching this dream, watching this movie of life. And so think about that as the M says, as Maharaj says here, there are no ruler and ruled here, right? There's because there's really nothing happening by a will as such. There is no duality whatsoever. This is all oneness. I'm every voice. I'm every person. I'm everything, that I am not a particular. You are merely projecting your own ideas, and this is what you watch. This is what this universal wisdom, in a sense, I don't know. I don't think we can actually talk about what this universal person is experiencing. but they see it as a movie, as a screen. You're merely projecting your own ideas. So you're just watching the projection of your consciousness as it filters through the lens of mind. You're watching it on the screen of mind. You're seeing this whole thing. That's what your thoughts are. That's what the world you live in is. It's a projection on the screen of mind of the reality going through a lens of your egoism, the lens of your identity, of what you've grabbed onto. And that distortion, that movie that you're watching, because it's been forced through a lens of colors and a lens of time and space and causation and a lens of body mind and a particular point of being, as it's forced to go through that prism of egoism, it shines on the screen of your mind as the projection of your world as you see it from this imagined singular perspective of this particular body mind, projected into time-space causation. He says, so there is no duality whatsoever. You are merely projecting your own ideas. Your scriptures and your gods have no meaning here. Literally, as my teeth would fall out if I sat in front of a teacher and he said those words to me with that kind of meaning. Your scriptures and your gods have no meaning here. Wow. Wow, that is something to digest. How can that be? What does this mean? Right? That our scriptures and our gods are all part of our delusion. Now, that has to be said, and now I have to come in and reassure you with something Thakur says. He says that does not make them not real. As long as you are seeing something, you just don't know what you're seeing, and you've created a narrative for what you're seeing, and that narrative is your Maya. It's the thing that prevents you from experiencing this divine reality. But this divine reality is not inside of our delusion. This divine reality is not in our dream as an actor or as a character, unless he, she, that infinity manifests themselves through an avatar, through an incarnation. Then the avatar takes on the attributes and steps into the dream and becomes a part of the play. But you see, from where he comes, there's no meaning to that, because there's no change. There's no time-space causation. There's no doer. There's nothing being done. There's the awareness that it's a projection, that it's a dream, and that there's billions of these projections going on simultaneously right now. And if we add all of them up, we would not have a full, but we would have a less partial understanding of God, because every projection is a story of God, a story of the nature of the divine, right? Because that's what we're watching. We're watching the projection of our divine nature being forced through a lens of egoism onto the screen of our mind. But Thakur says that God does appear, it does take form. He's formless as well as with form. God is everything and more. There is no limit. So Kali and Shiva and these deities are not figments of imagination. They are direct projections of the divine into the dream, into the play. But outside of the play, there's nothing. Or there's everything everywhere all at once going on. But outside of the play, the structure is not the same. That's why when we wake up, when we come to realization, so many of our questions get answered not with information, but because they just become meaningless in the context of reality. Just like in your dream, you can sit there and you can really be troubled with, well, how is it that I can fly? And so in your dream, you might start studying the physics of flight to figure out, how is this body able to fly? And it might be the whole focus of your whole dream. But then when you wake up, you're not going to go on doing the calculations of how it was possible for you to fly in the dream, right? Why? Because you understand the context of the dream was necessary for flying to happen. And so the questions about flying only belonged to the dream space. And so most of our questions about God only makes sense within the confines of our delusion, right? So when we step outside of this delusion, all of our doubts, all of our misunderstandings, all of our um, craziness comes to an end, because we realize that was just all part of the whirlwind of confusion that was our life as a manifested being who didn't know who he was or she was, right? So you're merely projecting your own ideas. Your scriptures and your gods have no meaning here. Questioner: still, you have a name and a shape. You display consciousness and activity. It's like, how can you say that you're coming from a place where there's no gods and goddesses, no scriptures, no duality at all? And yet here you are with a body and with a voice, and you're talking to me. And Maharaj says, in your world, I appear so, right? If I step into your dream, this is what you're going to see. If I become a part of your projection, this is what it looks like. So in your world, I appear so. In mine, I have being only. And we can see this in Ramakrishna, that he lived on that boundary of those two worlds. He could slip into his ecstasy where he completely just forgot the body. The body completely shut down. The heartbeat almost stopped. You could touch his eyeballs without affecting him. Because at that moment he has slipped just over that boundary into this world of that Maharaj is describing here, a world of no duality, no separateness, a world of just an indescribable world. That's always so frustrating, because you want to really just jump into a wonderful description of this place, and it's just not available. So in your world I appear so. In mine I have being only, nothing else. You people are rich with your ideas of possession, your ideas of quantity and quality. I am completely without ideas. Right? That's that silent mind. Full awareness, full knowledge, full love, perfect, content, needing nothing. There is no disturbance at all. It's like the swimming pool in the morning. I used to go for swim practice. I was on a swim team one time before I grew my own beach ball. I was a swimmer for a country club in Maryland, and I used to love to get there first in the morning and just sit there, because the pool looked like it had no water in it. It was just perfectly calm, and you could see the black lines on the bottom as perfect black lines. It was really cool, and all it took was one person to jump in that pool, and it looked like it had been disturbed for 1,000 years. It was just instantly fully disturbed. And so Thakur lived right in the boundary of those two places. He could come down when he would work to come up with an identity with body mind. He would force himself to come up with a desire. He says his primary desire was for the company of the devotees, just to be in the company of divine love. So that would bring him down back into his body. And when he was in his body in that half state, he would carry on conversations with the Divine Mother and with people in the room simultaneously, and seamlessly. Can you imagine what that experience must be, to be in that twilight zone where he's between two, well, all this description is probably unhelpful, but because it's from ignorance, but standing right on that boundary, peering into the dream and able to lift his head out of the dream simultaneously. So this is what he's talking about here. In your world, when I come into your world, when Thakur would come out of ecstasy and come back into his body, he says that it would take an idea of some sort of desire in order to attach him to the idea of a body mind, to bring him into the dream, just like it requires you to have something put you to sleep in order to enter into your dream. So apparently for these divine people, it takes a desire, a development of something, for them to dip into this dream, to be able to access or come into this dream, that normally they're in a space where there is no manifestation. They're in a state of pure being, the fullness of pure love, the fullness of pure wisdom, of pure intelligence, and the fullness of pure existence, all simultaneously. In my world, a questioner now says, in my world, there is disturbance, there's distress and despair. You seem to be living on some hidden income, while I must slave for a living. We already did this. So I stopped a little bit early. All right, so we're going to skip ahead here in a minute. So, but he's saying, in my world, there's disturbance, distress, and despair, all the things we complain about. How can God leave a world like this, right? How could God then, even Vivekananda saying, I could do a better job than God did. You seem to be living on some hidden income while I'm a slave for a living. Maharaj says, well, do as you please. You're free to leave your world for mine, right? You can always let go. You're not required to live in the reality you've created. It just takes your own permission to let go, right? And that's the thing that is so distressing to me. That's the thing that's so frustrating. I remember, and I've told this story so many times, but it's a perfect example. You know, when I broke my leg and my foot was literally dangling off the end of of my leg, not in the way that a foot should be dangling. And I had to put my own foot back on and line it up and hope that it was sort of where it was supposed to be. And I was literally holding it with both my hands, holding my foot in place. And when those ambulance men came and they needed to cut my pant leg, they said, okay, we're going to need you. We've got you in a splint. We just need you to let go of your leg. And I was like, okay. They were like, well, let go of your leg, please. I said, okay. Sir, you need to let go of your leg. And I was like, I've done everything I normally have to do to let go of my leg. It's just my hands are not listening. I can't let go of my leg. And they had to pry my own hands off of my own leg with my full permission. Very strange experience, right? But what that gave me a window as a Vedanta, and I started thinking about that. I was like, wow, look at that. This is our reality with our spiritual condition. We're only aware of the top inch and a half of our mind, random number. The top layer, that's where we live, what we're conscious of and what we're aware of, just this little tiny layer. And as long as everything's up there, we're fully in charge. But underneath that is this huge depth, a stack of plates, you know, underneath the one being used, that are the stored up vectors of expression from all of our life, and maybe multiple lives, maybe an eternal history even. And so we may say, oh, I want to be enlightened. But what's saying it? Only the top inch of our mind is saying, I want to be enlightened, because we haven't done any internal work to become aware or to detach and to be able to see the whole thing as a whole, because we've chosen a perspective that is egoistic, that sits only on the top inch and a half of mind. And so when God says, Mother says, you can have your enlightenment at this moment if you want it, you're like, oh yes, I want it. And yet your hands won't let go. you still want that piece of cake. You still want that little tinge of enjoyment. You still want that sense of control. You still want that sense of agency. You still want that sense of individual power, name and fame, whatever it is. So this is the importance of meditation. This is the importance of doing that inner work, so that you can become aware of what you're gripping with white knuckles that isn't listening to your conscious mind when you say you don't want to do it. Why is it that you keep doing things that you don't want to do? Well, this is why, right? This is why. And this is why the Divine Mother says, don't sweat it. I've got you. I've got you. Be where you're at, accept where you're at, keep taking a step forward, but understand, I've got you. I've got you. So that it's not, you can walk this walk in love with the divine without being in fear of loss, right? And that's the point of grace. That's the point of bhakti, actually. Giving you that permission to go forward, even though you don't technically deserve the fruits of going forward. You should be stuck for the decisions you've made, right? Which is why, as spiritual beings, we should be spending so much time in the presence of our beloved, because it takes that time and that presence to become convinced of the reality of grace and to figure out how to use that grace to get our hands to let go of our broken nature, our broken experience of self, right? So that God can put the splint on and heal us and then throw us into a bouncy ambulance. All right. I'm going to skip ahead here to where we really are. When I went back to look at what section we were on, I stopped at the first blue marker, and we were actually at the second blue marker. So we're at the question now where Maharaj says, mine is real and yours is of the mind, when he's talking about these two worlds, and so he's just invited his friend saying, you're welcome to come into my world anytime that you want. It's just that you're going to have to let go of your world. You're going to have to renounce your ignorance in order to come into this world. And so, of course, the guy's still stuck for the same reason that we are, because we're still white-knuckling the perceived benefits, the perceived pleasures of living in this world with the body-mind. And so the questioner says, still it seems that there's two worlds, mine and yours. And Maharaj says, yes, mine is real. Yours is of the mind. You're just making yours up. So there is nothing there. And so you're living in a world of your own choosing, your own make-believe. The questioner gets into a long question here. He says, imagine a rock and a hole in the rock and a frog in the hole. The frog may spend its life in perfect bliss, undistracted, undisturbed. Outside the rock, the world goes on. If the frog in the hole were told about the outside world, he would say, there is no such thing. My world is of peace and bliss. Your world is a word structure only. It has no existence. It is the same with you. Wow. So he's getting right down to it. It's the same with you. When you tell us that your world simply does not exist, there is no common ground for discussion. Or take another example. I go to a doctor and complain of stomachache. He examines me and says, you are well, all right. But it pains, I say. Your pain is mental, he asserts. I say, it does not help me to know that my pain is mental. You are a doctor. Cure me of my pain. If you cannot cure me, you are not my doctor. All right. Some pretty good points there, right? Saying, look, if I just lived in a hole of ignorance and just shut myself off from everything, I could say everything that you're saying. But is that the responsible thing? And is that the reality? Or are you just clambering up in a hole somewhere? And, if you can't fix me from where you're at, then you're not my doctor. You're not my teacher. Maharaj, just two words and answered all that. Quite right. Quite right. Sometimes when you ask a question, you don't want to be right. All right, quite right. Well, the questioner says, well, you've built the railroad, but for a lack of a bridge, no train can pass. Build the bridge. Maharaj, there's no need for a bridge. Questioner, there must be some link between your world and mine. Maharaj, there is no need of a link between a real world and an imaginary world, for there cannot be any. Questioner, so what are we supposed to do? Maharaj, investigate your world. Apply your mind to it. Examine it critically. Scrutinize every idea about it. That will do. That's it. Why? Because we're talking about a truth. We're talking about reality. If it's real, the evidence has to be there. We have to be able to arrive, if we are of the nature of intelligence, we have to be able to see this, right? And so this is what we have to do. Scrutinize your inner world. Where do your ideas of what is true and what is come from? Why have you chosen only a subset of them? How many ideas about yourself passes through the mind in a day, and you only grab various ones of them? Why are you grabbing those particular ones? You should know. You're doing it even at this moment. You have to become aware of your inside world instead of just letting it run on autopilot, right? Instead of just blindly obeying your thoughts and blindly obeying the urges of your body, get in there and find out what's going on. Where is all this coming from? You know, I had somebody tell me yesterday they were a victim of themselves. Well, how do we become victims of ourselves? Through non-attention. When we hand over our keys to automatic processes and forget that we had the keys. That's the only reason that we've become subject to this. So investigate your world, apply your mind to it. Okay, this is what mind is used for. It's not meant to be there to gyrate on experience and gyrate on desires and to gyrate on imagined possibilities and imagined histories and imagined events from the past. It's not for that. It's meant to be a tool of awareness to undo its own delusion. That's what the mind is for, right? That's why Thakur says, you know, you take one thorn to pull out the thorn that's sticking in your finger. Now, once you get that thorn out of your finger, you throw the other thorn away. Mind's only use is to suss out its freedom, to suss out your freedom, to find its true nature, that its true nature is this infinitude, this one without a second, that there is no particularization necessary. That you as a body mind are going to carry on according to your karmas, regardless of whether you are there or not. Right? That's the thing. Your life is the work of karma. It's not the work of your creation necessarily. Your creation has been your identification with random things that have defined random problems for you and created random perspectives of trouble in our lives. This is the nature of mind for everybody. This is what we're all going to. This is why we call each other brother and sister, because we're all stuck. So investigate your world, apply your mind to it, examine it critically. Don't let anything come by. Scrutinize every idea, right? Scrutinize every thought. Don't let anything come by your viewport of awareness without you being aware of it. And that's how you come to understand, oh my God, I'm not the doer. Oh my God, I'm not a body. Oh my God, I'm separate from my mind. Oh my God, I don't have to obey all of these impulses all the time. I'm actually a free soul, free to go in any direction at this moment, free to be, even at the invitation of Sri Nisargadatta. Right? So he says that scrutinize every idea about it. That will do. That's all you have to do. Bring your world into the light of awareness. Everything will be taken care of. Questioner, the world is too big for investigation. All I know is that I am the world. All I know is that I am the world is. The world troubles me, and I trouble the world. Maharaj, my experience is that everything is bliss, but the desire for bliss creates pain. Thus, bliss becomes the seed of pain. The entire universe of pain is born of desire. Give up the desire for pleasure, and you will not even know what pain is. Right? So, this sense of finding the moment inadequate is what causes our pain. Right? And why do we find this moment inadequate? Because we perceive this moment through the eyes of a mind and through the eyes of a body, and not through the eyes of the self. And because the interpolations that take place as we view this world through a body mind, the interpolations that take place cause desire, because we identify with something that is limited. Instead of knowing ourselves to be this dreamer happily asleep comfortably in the bed with all of our needs met, everything peaceful, we've instead identified ourselves with a character in the dream who's terrified of being killed by a gang that's been chasing it for the last 2 hours down an imaginary street in an imaginary world. And so we suffer. And we wonder, we yell in our dream, why am I suffering? And the sleeper doesn't even hear it. The sleeper's snoring away, perfectly happy, perfectly content. So you can see, how can we be discontent and content at the same time? By simply tying our identity up with something we are not. In that dream, if you could become aware that you were the sleeper and that you were the entirety of the dream, that dream would be nothing but fun. It'd be nothing but a grand experiment. Oh, let's try this. Let's see if I can fly. Let's see if I can die and rise again. Let's see if I can wake up. You know, if you're aware that you are all that's in the dream, none of the struggles are real. They all become part of this divine play. Nothing is awry. You understand that all is well, that you're perfectly at rest and you're perfectly content as the sleeper. So that's what we're trying to do in this dream. We're trying to poke around enough to say, oh my God, this is a dream. And once we become aware that this is a dream, 99% of the work is done. 99% of the work is done, because from that perspective, we could never really believe in a desire again. We could never really believe that we needed anything again, because we would have this understanding, this notion that would be in the background of the fact that this is a dream, that there's a greater reality enveloping this, a greater sense of being enveloping this. So Maharaj says, my experience, everything is bliss. I'm the sleeper. I'm the one asleep in the bed. I know that I'm well fed. I know that I'm warm. I know that I'm comfortable. I know that everything is taken care of, regardless of what's going on in my dream. But the desire, so he says, my experience, everything is bliss. So if everything is bliss, there's no need for bliss. But the desire for bliss creates pain, right? So when you make yourself particular at all, when you cut off your awareness of everything as bliss, then you experience non-bliss, and that creates pain. And thus bliss becomes the seed of pain. Desire for bliss, because is what activates the seed of pain. The entire universe of pain is born of desire. Give up the desire for pleasure, and you will not even know what pain is. Right? So give up the desire for pleasure, which is what defines your pain. Give that up, and pain disappears. That's the practice of non-attachment, the practice of non-resistance, right? Accepting the moment as perfect, because God is everywhere present and always perfect. The questioner, well, why should pleasure be the seed of pain? Why should pleasure be the seed of pain? Maharaj, because for the sake of pleasure, you are committing many sins, and the fruits of sin are suffering and death, right? So why should pleasure be the seed of pain? And it's not so much that pleasure is the seed of pain, it's that you forget your bliss because it's constant and unchanging. So it's not interesting. It doesn't entertain the mind, The mind wants some excitement. The mind wants some ups and downs. And you identify with mind. And so you want some ups and downs. And so now you have to start doing selfish things to meet your selfish ends. Your search for pleasure is for your own pleasure, right? Your search for food is for your own hunger. And so this is what he's calling sin, what we just call unhelpful living, living that causes delusion, right? And so when we start chasing the I and its needs born of body mind, then we get carried away in this crazy world of ups and downs and confusion and angers and excitements and pleasures and pains, and we try and make sense of a tangled skein of yarn. Well, there is no purpose in a tangled skein of yarn. It's a tangled skein of yarn. It's a mistake, right? The only thing you do with a tangled skein of yarn is untangle it. And so this is what the purpose of your life is. Untangle your tangled skein of yarn. Get it wound back in its original shape again. Come to the knowledge of who you are and of what you are and what your nature is. and then stop desiring based on the feedback of body and mind and start acting on an inspiration by the nature within you, that nature of pure love that loves to love. That's its highest dream, is to love. That loves wisdom, loves learning, loves intelligence. So, live by that inspiration and do all of it through this moment by being fully aware of a direct manifestation of this divine self everywhere, all the time, all at once. And move into the world of Sri Nisargadatta, a world of bliss that is not mitigated by little squirts of pleasure here and there, but is mitigated by an opened pot where everything comes and goes simultaneously, and everything balances out to a 0 point of divine bliss, of divine comfort. So for the sake of your pleasures, you're committing many sins, many selfish acts. And the fruits of these selfish acts or this sin are suffering and death. You identify, you have chosen to say, I am this body and I am this mind, and both of those things have expiration dates on them. And so you have chosen death by identifying with body and mind. And if you've made that choice, you experience that choice. As the body lays dying, you will fear the panic. You will have that panic and fear of dying. Like, oh my God, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. What a horrible thing. What a terrifying thing to go through, right? But when you know yourself, I'm not this body and mind, then you just watch it drop off, like an old seed or like a snake leaving its skin behind, like a pillowcase in Thakur Sri Ramakrishna's words, just changing pillowcases. And the fear of death is gone because you understand, I am never going to die. I have never died. I am awareness itself. I am existence itself. All of this is in me. I am not in all of this. This is all in me. So the questioner says, you say the world is of no use to us, that it's only a tribulation. I feel that it cannot be so. God is not such a fool. The world seems to me a big enterprise for bringing the potential into actual, matter into life, the unconscious into full awareness. To realize the supreme, we need the experience of the opposites. Just as for building a temple, we need stone and mortar, wood and iron, glass and tiles. So for making a man into a divine sage, a master of life and death, one needs the material of every experience. As a woman goes to the market, buys provisions of every sort, comes home, cooks, bakes, and feeds her Lord, so we bake ourselves nicely in the fire of life and feed our God. I love that one, because he's lying. If his life was really all about what he's saying it's all about, he'd be realized in about 2.5 hours. It's like, yeah. but that's not the reality. That's how we dress up our excuse for choosing this life. For everything that we're told to let go of, we've come up with our reasons of why it's necessary to hold on to it. And this is his reason, in the light of being told, you can come into my world right now if you want. This is his non-question. This is his justification for his world that he likes. And that is the only reason that we remain in the world we're in. We like it. That's tough to hear. When I was diagnosed with severe depression in 2008, I had to deal with that. I had to sit in the shrine quite a few hours, quite a few days, quite a few weeks, quite a few years, trying to figure out, how does this serve me? Clearly, I'm depressed and hold on to the idea of being depressed because it serves me somehow. It took me a long time to figure out how I was using my depression to give me a sense of doership, to give me a sense of it sort of made me feel better to not be happy about the way my life was. It was, in a way, a payment for my indulgence, right? It was a way that I held myself accountable to the pleasures in life that I was attached to. So the world that you're holding on to serves you somehow. That's the reason you can't let go of it. There's something in there that you like, that you want, and you're willing to pay or even need to pay the price of your misery to hold on to it. This is a standard delusion for every human being. This is the suffering of life. This is the reason for spiritual life, because there is a way to be free. There is a way to walk out of that delusion. There is a way to return to your nature. And that's through this close observation to figure out where you made the wrong decisions, where you misunderstood things, and to let that bubble through your layer of samskaras to the top, to be the undoing. So Maharaj responds to this justification for life as being necessary for realization. He says, well, if you think so, act on it, right? That's a great teacher. I'm not going to tell you any different. You're not going to be able to hear something different. If that's the way you see life being, become aware and start acting on it, and it will tell you whether it's true or not. Act on it. Feed your God by all means, right? So he's not holding back at all. He's not saying, oh, that's very dangerous to think that way. Oh, that's not a good idea. Oh, here's the truth. You have to believe this and not that. That's usually the approach to spiritual life. But he's saying, no, if that's what you really see, then act on it, but act on it with awareness and test your results. Is it true? Is the way that you're seeing the world true? Does it actually work that way? Right? This life is your experiment. That's a wonderful, wonderful joy in spiritual life. It's one of the things perhaps I enjoy too much, which might be why I also am stuck in this cycle, is to experiment. When you hear one of these truths, take it to your lab of the inner world, take it into your laboratory, set it up there on your little table and put your little white jacket of grace on and, walk into the presence of Mother and say, okay, hold up your scalpel. Mother, how do we test this idea? Is this true? How is it that I'm not the body and mind? What does it mean to be body and mind? Show me. Can you show me for a second? And you sit there quietly with Mother and you take that scalpel to your thoughts, to your ideas of who you are and what you are, and you test them. And you come up with ways of testing them. You're saying, well, if that's true, if I did this, this should happen. And you can do this and test, and it will or will not happen. Right? So stay in this inner world. Be true to yourself. Go forward. Nobody can just, pretend these things. That's the temptation in the beginning, for sure. We see this all as an imitation. And so we go to church or we go to temple and we do what everybody else is doing in the way that everybody else is doing it. Until we get better at it, then we can tell everybody else how to do it. And it gets carried on. Go ahead. Carry on your experiment. See how it works. See what the fruit of it is. The nature of this universe is truth. So if you engage with this universe, it will take you to truth. But you've got to stay aware, right? Aware without a preference or an aversion. Just pure awareness. If the world is false, then the plan... Well, if you think so, act on it. Feed your God by all means. Questioner. A child goes to school and learns many things, which will be of no use to it later. But in the course of learning, it grows. So, do we pass through experiences without number and forget them all? But in the meantime, we grow all the time. And what is Gyani but a man with a genius for reality? The world of mind cannot be an accident. It makes sense. There must be a plan behind it. My God has a plan. Maharaj, if the world is false, then the plan and its creator are also false. Well, that's a big gun right there. That's a big gun. If you are living in a world of your own imagination, how are you determining what God's plan is? How are you determining what this God's will that you've created is? You're living in a ship that's completely made up. How are you going to tell me how it was built or why it was built? It's not there, first of all. It has no substance. It's just a wave in a mind. How are you going to assign all of this to it? Right? So if the world is false, then the plan and its creator are also false. This indirectly is telling you why it's helpful to have a guru, at least for the beginning portion of your spiritual life. And then I remind you with the difficult teaching that the beginning is 99%. The 99 spiritual life is the only thing that has a 99% beginning, a 0.1% of experience, and then a realization. So all of us need a guru. And why? So that we can get input on thought and behavior outside of our ego structure, outside of the universe that we've created for ourselves, so that we can know what's up and what's down, or at least have our ideas of up and down challenged by someone outside of our ego sphere. So if the world is false, then the plan and its creator are also false. Questioner, again, you deny the world. There is no bridge between us. Maharaj, there is no need of a bridge, right? Second time he's telling him, you can't bridge to the imaginary world, you can't go to Hogwarts from here. It doesn't. There is no bridge between this and an imagined world. And he says, there is no need of a bridge. Your mistake lies in your belief that you are born. The very fundamental thing. Your mistake lies in the belief that you were born. That's a very early mistake. You had to learn that, right? When you inhabited this body, you didn't know it was your body. They've done that with this. I read that wonderful. I was going to do a lecture on child that involved child psychology. So I read an article out of Psychology Today, and it was talking about infant development. And one of the things it says is that it takes an infant 9 months to realize that the toes in front of his eyes belong to him or her or that they. That this baby, it takes you 9 months to realize that your toes are your toes. It's not natural. It's not your natural state to be in this body. You had to learn. You had to be taught incorrectly, but taught nonetheless. These are your toes. These are your hands. This is your nose, right? Don't we all do all of that to these little children? We happily train them into their ideas of being a body and a mind. We happily put their eyes on their future and take it off of the present. We happily give them a purpose to fulfill their desires and to create their desires. We happily ask them at every holiday and every birthday, what do you want? What can I get you? Right? And so we were experts at bringing up ignorant children. Experts at it. And now we're trying to become experts of undoing what we've done. And this is why we are in a challenge. So your mistake lies in the belief that you are born. You were never born, nor will you ever die. But you believe that you were born at a certain date and place, and that a particular body is your own. Questioner, the world is, I am. These are facts. All right, they're both picking out their big guns here and firing across the bow. These are facts. The world's here. I don't know what you're talking about. Maharaj, why do you worry about the world before taking care of yourself? You want to save the world, don't you? Can you save the world before saving yourself? And what means being saved? Saved from what? From illusion. Salvation is to see things as they are. There's a beautiful definition. Salvation is to see things as they are. I really do not see myself related to anybody or anything, not even to a self, whatever that self may be. I remain forever, undefined. I am, within and beyond, intimate and unapproachable. This is the world he inhabits in his true nature. And what's interesting is he's still purely functional in this dream. You know, it's not that he's become a dull and drooling idiot on a log because he's not participating in the dream. He's become a dynamic, active beacon of light through this knowledge. When you drop all of your desires, you know, you don't just become dull, you become a beacon of expression. Expression of what? An expression of a pure and undifferentiated love, a love that goes everywhere all at once in full force. An expression of what? Of intelligence, of a seeing, of an acceptance, of an isness, of a reality beyond senses, beyond causes, and just full of being. You know, so that you can be so present. I did a little reading on the Japanese tea ceremony yesterday, and just this wonderful notion of presence that is there when you watch someone who's a practitioner of that pour a cup of tea. You can see that pouring a cup of tea can be the most beautiful act in the world. You know, you can just watch that person with full attention pour that tea and set it down and do everything exactly. It's a beautiful thing to watch. Swami Mahayogananda doing a puja, you know, exactly the same for me, the same experience. Just that attention, just that precision, just that focus. You know, up until I saw him do puja, I didn't really have much value for puja. I just like, whatever. I don't know what that is, but not important to me. But after, when I was a brahmachari, you know, he came up and did the puja one time for at the center in Berkeley, and I was mesmerized, just mesmerized, and I understood puja after that. I was like, wow, that was deep, that was amazingly beautiful. You know, I didn't see any throwing of flowers and half attention chanting of mantras and just getting something done in a certain amount of time. Everything was placed. Everything was said in its time. Every piece of incense was carefully placed in the holder. You know, everything was just absolutely done. This is life. This is how to live a beautiful life. And this is natural to us, to live a life of that attention, of that focus, because we're doing the internal work of not letting a single idea pass unscrutinized, not letting a single untruth manifest through this experience, right? Not allowing a false narrative to control our life. This is what we do. This is how we live. This is what it is to be a spiritual seeker, right? So don't worry about the world before taking care of yourself. Don't put the cart before the horse, right? Vivekananda says a man in deep meditation on a mountaintop does more service to humanity than 1,000 people volunteering in a hospital. Right? Because these men and women throughout the ages who have done that work, whose names we still read, you know, whose lives we still study, whose characters we still sit in awe of, they have done more good for the experience of humanity than all of the volunteers in the world. Now, does that mean stop volunteering? No. But it means you have one most important thing, right? And that is to see things as they are, to understand them. And everything up until that point is practice to that end. Because you cannot serve the world until you lose the idea of self, of an ego self. Everything that you do will be a service to your ego until you have destroyed that ego, until you have transcended that egoism, right? And brought it into relationship with the notion of God, with the notion of existence, right? So why do you worry about the world before taking care of yourself? You want to save the world, don't you? Can you save the world before saving yourself? If you haven't found your own way out, how can you lead others on your way out? This is one of the biggest struggles of every Swami I know. Right? And it's through surrender, really, where we just do our best to open our hearts and hear the truth, right? And what is the means of being saved? Saved from what? We're being saved from an illusion. Our illusion of fear, our illusion of hate, our illusion of pain, our illusion of trouble. Oh, it's 10:06. He says, salvation is to see things as they are. I really do not see myself related to anybody or anything. That's detachment, right? Not even to a self, whatever that may be. I remain forever undefined. I am within and beyond, intimate and approachable. So
You said approachable or unapproachable?
unapproachable.